Hello and welcome everyone to IT Pro Guide. Mohammed Niaz with you. This video is a part of a hands-on video series of Spring microservices, Docker and Kubernetes. So you're watching the very first video. In this video, we are going to demonstrate how to create a Spring Boot application, then how to make a Docker image out of that Spring Boot application. So that Spring Boot application will have a create user, a read a user, and read all user REST services. As a backend, we're going to use MySQL. So we will also spin a MySQL Docker image. Then we will also use Nginx for our front end proxy services. Then we're going to text all these web services using Postman. So going to be very simple, but this is, I think, very good for someone who know already Docker and do want to do some kind of hands-on. The first step that we are going to do in Docker is to create a Docker network, and for that the command is docker network, then create. Then you can give a network name here. So let's do that first. So in my environment, I have installed Microsoft Windows Desktop Docker version, and I can use the Windows command line to run the Docker command. So you can see that Docker network create, and as this was Spring demo, so I just give the name Spring demo network. Once you create, if you want to list all the networks, you can go to Docker network, then ls. So you can see the first three are default. Once you install the Docker, you will see it, and Spring demo network is the one we created, and you can see the driver is bridge driver. The next step is to create a database, and for that we're going to use MySQL database, and you can directly run the docker run command to create a MySQL database. And here what we're going to do when we run this Docker container for MySQL, that time we will say what network we need to connect to the Docker container and the name of the container, and also we will give the root password and also a database name that our application is required. And also you can provide the port. So as this is going to be in a private network where external ports are not need to be connected, because the Spring Boot application and MySQL, you don't need to provide an external port, because the Postman will be connecting over the Nginx. But here, if you want to test, as this is a demo environment, if you need to test, you can give the port also, the external port also, so that you can also test it from outside the container. So you can look at the commands, and that is what we are going to run now. So let's run docker run, then the network that we just created. So I'm going to point the MySQL, or connect the MySQL to the network that we just created. Then let's give a name for the container. Then a MySQL root password, database name. So the -e is for the environment variable. So here our first environment variable is the root password, and the second one is the database name. So the database I need for this application is userdb, so that I create while running the Docker container itself. I'm going to create the database also, then the image name and the version. So here I put latest. So as I said, the port is not compulsory here, because our architecture is to connect through Nginx. But in case if you want to test, you can use this. So you can see that the port number 330. Is you can access the database from your desktop, and 3306 is the internal port. So as the image is not locally available, this is gonna download it and prepare the image. And once it complete, if you type docker images, you will be able to see what are the images available, and docker ps will help you to know what are the docker containers running in the environment. So the MySQL Docker container is running. If you go to the Docker desktop application, you can see that the container is running and the ports are also mentioned there. So from the Docker desktop, if you click on the container, then you can go to the terminal, and from there you can access the shell, and also from there you can check the database which we asked it to create while docker run through the environment variable is there or not. So for that you type MySQL, then which username you are going to log in. So we have only root, then about p for the password, then enter the password. So that will give access, the SQL access for you. Then now you can type show then databases. So I have to give a space, show space databases. So that will list out the database, and you can see that the user DB is there, which means we succeeded with the database creation. Now the next step is to create a Spring Boot application with 3 REST services, and that's gonna use the MySQL container that we just created. So I'm not going to show you step by step how you can create a Spring Boot application, because there are a lot of courses available for that already. My aim is to give you some kind of hands-on that you can practice to make the Docker, Kubernetes, and other the connectivity networks and all more flexible for you by doing it as an experiment on different kind of scenarios actually. So what I will do, I will show the application, then also I'm gonna provide you a GitHub repo link down in the description of this video, so you can go and download that source code and you can make use of it. And also the images that I'm gonna use in this is also going to be available in the IT Pro Guide Docker Hub, where you can download it, and also you can try all these demos yourself. So here is the source code for this REST API demo application in my Spring Boot. So you can see that I have 3 REST services available here. One is to create a user, then get user by ID, and get all users. So as I said, the source code is available in GitHub. You can go and pull it. Now go to the application properties, because here is where you're gonna play around mostly. So here you can see that this is the data source URL, which means the MySQL connection details for this application. But you can see that I have an extra line here. So if I have this line, which means the active profile is Docker, then in this case this application docker.properties is going to be the one used for this application while building the application. So as it is Docker mentioned here, this is going to be consumed. If the Docker is not mentioned, for example, I comment this, then this will be used in order to get the connection details of the database actually. So now if you go to the application.properties, you can see that spring.datasource.url, and it is a variable I given here, $spring data source URL. Why I give like this? Because when I'm going to create a Docker container for this application, I can feed this as an environment variable, the username, the password, and the data source URL. So it is can be used with any data sources. So it doesn't need to be a fixed one. So that is the purpose of giving this as environment variables. So simple, the active profile is going to be Docker. Then you create application -docker.properties, and you enter all the details, and here we're going to use environment variables, so you can fill up this area with this kind of variables. So if you are going to directly provide the details here, then this is how it is going to be, but it is not practical all the cases, because if you want to use this image as a general image, then it is always good to provide things as environment variables, so it gives a flexibility for the users to use it. So we are going to replace these direct values with some variables, so that it can be replaced by environment variables while running the Docker container. So we are done with the application properties. Now it is time to create the application. So you can see that when you look at this target folder, you will not see first time this db-spring-demo.jar file. So this is our application build files. So what we have to do is we go and click on the Maven, then expand the project, then expand the life cycle, and make sure you click this a skip test option, so you will be able to see it here that the text is crossed with a line. Then select clean and package, then you just press the play button. So that gonna build a updated file of this jar file. So if you are going to create it first time, you will see this will not be available there. Then once it finish this, you will see this build succeeded. So this is our application file. The next step is to create a Docker file. So in order to create a Docker file, we can create it from here, like new, then a file, then you give the exact name as Docker file with the first letter D as uppercase and the rest as a small letter. So here I already created the Docker file. You can see that I have a Docker file here. So in the Docker file, I'm going to use this JDK Eclipse JDK. Then I put the label maintainer as my email address. Then I'm going to say that create a work directory, and this directory name is app. Then I'm going to say copy under the target folder, that is here. You will find a db-spring-demo snapshot jar, that is the one we built just now, and copy and paste it over here, application, which is just we created here, and inside the application we are asking to paste this. So after this line, the next line is this to start the application. So this is what the Docker file. The next step is to build an image for this Docker file. So once you create a Docker file and save all, the next step is to create the Docker image. Now you can see two commands that I already run in the terminal. One is a Docker images, which list all the images in this system, and second is Docker PS, which list all the containers. Now we are going to create a new image with the jar file that we built for the Spring Boot application, and the Docker file also resides in the same folder, so we only need to point this file with the build image command. So for that, let's run the build image command. So Docker build, then we have to provide a tag name. So for that, enter the a meaningful name which relate to the image. So here it is a Spring Boot application for a user creation, let's say. So we can say something like a Spring user image, something like that. Then you put a dot, which is like the Docker file is resides in the same folder. So dot will help to understand the system that the Docker file is in the same folder. So now you can see that it is it built a new image. So if you run the Docker images command, now you will be able to see that a new image is available in your system. Or if you have the desktop application also, you can simply open it and see. Now the next part is to run the Docker image so that it will run as a container. So the first thing, Docker, then like the network that we created in the beginning, so docker network ls. If you want to copy paste, the best idea is to run a docker network ls, and from there you can simply copy paste the name actually. So let's complete the command docker run, then network, the one we created before. So all the applications will be in one network, so they can talk each other, no need to provide an external port number. Then we're going to provide spring data source url, spring data source username, and spring data source password. So these are the environment variables that the application.properties expect when you're gonna run the docker run command. So this is how you can actually like more generalize the images. So enter, and that's gonna create a spring application. So you can see that the spring application has started and on the port 8080. So our two containers are ready. The next step is to create a Nginx. For the Nginx, we gonna start with a Docker file from Nginx. Then we're gonna remove if there is any default configurations available. Then we're gonna say that copy the config from the nginx.configuration file, and we're gonna provide Nginx configuration file in the same folder. And you can see that listen. So listen is the port of the Nginx container. So here I use 8080 for the Spring Boot application. So I'm gonna give the same name, Spring User Demo, then the 8080 port, and for the listening I'm gonna give 8888. So Nginx will run in port 888 or listen port 888, and you can see that here also I mentioned what to expose. So now we are ready. We have a Docker file for Nginx and also the configuration file also available for the Nginx. So the next step is to build an image for the Nginx with this Docker file, and then we're gonna run the Nginx container. So Docker images will list all the images in this system. So we can see our two new images that we created, and they are running, but we haven't tested it yet. Once we have the Nginx running, then we will test it. So first thing, we have to build an Nginx image with this Docker file and the configuration. So Docker build, yes. Then we have to give a tag. So you can give the tag name, and this something like Nginx image or container, something like that we can provide. Yeah, it's an image, so we have to provide image, not container. Then I put a dot, which means the Docker file is in the same folder. So you can now see that it pull the base image of Nginx, and also it's gonna remove the configuration, then they copy the new configuration which we provided and expose the listener at port 8888. Now the image is ready. The next step is to run the container. So we can see that the Docker run is our command, and we have to also run this container in the same network so that all of this will be connected. So you can see Docker run, then -d, it is detached mode, then network name, then the container, we're going to give a name to the container, then port, then the image name. So a container will be running with the basis of Nginx image based on the Docker file that we created. So we are done with all the preparations. Now if you go to the Docker desktop, you will be able to see our three Docker containers running. Now let's go to the Postman, and you can see that the port I'm going to use now is 888, because if I use 888 it will be pointing to the Nginx. So I can get a user, I can create a user. Yes, I can create a user. Yeah, let's send and test it. So if you click on the send, and if it is returning the same information, because in the Spring Boot we have details to return it. Yeah, it's working. Now let's try to get all the users also. So we are done with our demo. So thank you for watching this video. I know it is going to be difficult to copy the commands from the screen. So all the commands that we typed in this video is available below in the description. as a link to the GitHub repo. So go to the GitHub repo and copy or whatever the commands that you need, the Postman collection, the Spring Boot application, and also the images. If you want, you can go to Docker Hub and get it. So that's it, we are done, and I will come up with new videos on similar topic with more and more containers. Thank you for watching. Subscribe my YouTube channel for more videos.